Hello, beautiful souls. Hello. Welcome, guys. Welcome to our live stream tonight. Who are the dark forces? Hey, guys. Welcome in. So, I feel like this chat will put me in the loony bin in a lot of people's minds. This topic, not a lot of people like to really talk about, like to discuss, but I know my fellow truth seekers definitely want to chat about who the dark forces are and how we know they exist and why it's important to acknowledge that they exist, have some kind of level of understanding about how they influence us in our day-to-day life so that we can take our power back. Hey guys, welcome in. Amazing. So we're talking about the dark forces, the controllers. Who are they? What are some of the kind of going theories about who they are, and also how it shows up in our day-to-day life? So you could say that the average person, especially pre-COVID, would kind of argue with you that they even exist. I don't know if any of you have had a conversation with someone where you might start talking about something that's kind of a conspiracy theory, and they might say, oh yeah, well, like, who is they? When you say, oh, they're doing this, or oh, they're doing this to our food, or whatever. And they're skeptical, right? They're like, who's they? Who's this they that you talk about, right? And I find it fascinating. Yeah, that like basically, your normal average person who has never really had a need or desire to question things, question the status quo, may never have even considered that there is a dark force controlling our world, and that there are controllers beyond the visible government and entities like organizations and things that we see. Yeah, they just tend to just not even acknowledge them, right? Yeah. So the typical person, they really wouldn't even want to acknowledge their existence. An example from my personal life is a cousin of mine who I've had to block a couple of times. Because we just have like radically different views, and it's okay, we can still be family members, but during COVID and stuff, we have a lot of disagreements. But this individual works at a university, is very much in the academic world, and this person, like other typical normies, would acknowledge that there is corruption in government, right? They'd acknowledge, there's corruption in government, but that they wouldn't be able to acknowledge the existence of a far greater power structure that is informing our world and informing our day-to-day lives and modern society. Because someone who's sort of steeped in that academic world, to think or to contemplate that sort of thing would be sort of against that entire existence and world that they live in, right? And when it comes to acknowledging the dark forces, even if you kind of get into the spiritual community, or like the spiritual community, where they'll immediately like shut down that conversation, and they'll say, oh, dark forces, not in my reality. Not in my reality, love and light, love and light. And that's like the exact definition of spiritual bypassing, where you just say, oh, well, it's not in my reality. Like they might acknowledge that they exist, but they don't, they'll say, oh, well, if you give energy and think about and talk about the dark forces that are in control of the world, then you give them more energy and you make them grow stronger. And that's just another lie that you've been told, if that's what you believe, because the truth is that they grow in the shadow and in the darkness, and that's how the dark forces are able to continue doing what they're doing. It's how they're able to grow and continue to be in secret and just in the shadows, where some people think they exist, but then some people don't, and it's hard to really prove their existence, but you certainly can through observation. And so if you're one of those spiritual people who you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about the dark forces, I'm just gonna, do my thing and focus in on things, like there's really nothing wrong with that if that is the path that you choose. But know that if as a collective humanity, if we don't turn to look at the dark forces and acknowledge their existence, then their program, their exploitative slavery program is going to continue on into the future generations, into perpetuity, on and on and on. It's just going to perpetuate and continue on. So that's why I believe it's so important to actually acknowledge them and be the spiritual light bringers, acknowledging that there are dark forces, that there are controllers in this world. And once we acknowledge it, that's when we can change it, right? They say that about everything. You can't change a habit, an addiction, unless you acknowledge that you have an addiction, that there is a problem. So you can't hope to change anything unless you acknowledge it. So there is a few different philosophies that many of you have probably heard of. And I'm just kind of debating in this moment exactly where to start. Because I usually do, plan out these lives, and I usually sort of know what I'm going to speak about. But I guess what we'll do is we'll start with David Icke's example of the system and how it works. So he has the idea of a spider in the middle of a web, and in that web are then circles or groups of people, of individuals, of humans, who are working to sort of keep that spider secretive. So I drew sort of what he sort of talks about. So if you can imagine a spider in the middle of a web, right? And that all of these individuals, these people who know of the spider's existence, they're just in the direct vicinity of the spider. And then the individuals on the outside are then only in communication with this person, and they don't know about the spider's existence, right? So only the people in the direct vicinity of the spider know of the spider's existence. And then everyone out from there, they just get their orders. These could be levels of government, these could be, organizations, these are humans. A lot of the time it's just humans carrying out their orders and of their job, carrying things out, but they never question where that comes from. And they might say, well, this directive, this thing I'm doing for my job, it just came from upon high. And I'm not questioning it, I'm just going to do it. And then I'm going to give orders down to this person. So again, the only people that even know of the spider's existence and know about their true nature and who they are and what they are, whether they're human or even not human, it's only this group of people that know exactly what the spider is. And then everyone out from there are just people, order followers, just doing their job, carrying out the spider's agenda. And what kind of keeps these people sort of in line and whatnot is, any number of things. Jason Christoff talks about paycheck mind control, which is essentially you're given a paycheck, likely a high-paying job, and in order to keep getting that paycheck and continue your life, right? Like if you have a mortgage and you've got cars and trucks and kids and a boat and all the things that, when you build your life, it requires that paycheck. So it's like paycheck coercion, paycheck mind control, right? And that's especially true for these folks out here who don't really know of the spider's true nature, right? So these people under paycheck mind control, so let's say, for example, they're pushing through a bill that's not moral, right? It's against true morality. some kind of bill, right? But they pass it through because of paycheck mind control, where they want to get that promotion next year, and they want to make sure their manager sees that they're doing what they want them to do. And so they just go along to get along, even though they might know that passing a bill or whatever it is through is actually immoral. They'll do it anyways, just because, they want to please their manager. They want to keep getting their paycheck mind control, right? They want to keep getting their paycheck. And that's like one of the really saddest things about our reality, is that not enough people are motivated by morality, because it's all about money and acquiring assets and power and so on, right? So when we talk about the controllers and who's in control, like, a big part of it are humans who have been corrupted, humans who, again, under paycheck mind control, under kind of really a coercion when you really think of it, but everyone has a choice. And, if what you're doing is immoral, you always have the choice to choose not to do it. So a lot of people might say, or might believe, that the government is like the highest order, and like there's nothing above the government. The government is the highest control, the president, the prime minister, whatever. It's like the highest control. I think the majority of us, especially in this chat, would agree that that's not the case. But yeah, so the government is like essentially made up of a lot of folks who have been corrupted, insider trading, conflict of interest type things, all of those kinds of things, right? And then there's, the odd person, I'm sure, of course, like the public sector is really big, who believe what they're doing is great and good. And, maybe there's nothing that they're particularly doing that is necessarily immoral, but they believe themselves to be a good person actually serving humanity and so on. But there's obviously lots of different levels of government and whatnot. And so, but the question is, and of course what David Icke has postulated many times, is that the true controllers of this world may not even be human, right? And he has lots of theories as to who and what they are. And, in this talk, as everything that I'm saying, these are all possibilities. I'm not necessarily saying it's any one thing or the other, but I'm opening the conversation around it and just bringing some light to this topic, and not saying that anything is actually, I think that, that's that and this is that. I'm just like offering possibilities, right? And I always thought, whenever I first saw David Icke's diagram of the spider in the middle of the web, and only these individuals knew of the spider's existence and the spider's true nature, who are they? Are they even human? Where do they live? Do they live in land that's not on any of our maps, maybe? These are all possibilities, because we've been lied to on like absolutely every level. And what keeps these individuals in line as well, that are right next to the spider, is sort of a level of secrecy that transpires between them as they transgress, as they do things that are immoral, and as they're developing more and more power, and they do transgressions, crimes, things like that. They end up having to become almost a secret society of their own, keeping each other's secrets, which actually continues the cycle of transgressions and secrets and all of that. But I truly do believe we are at a time where all this is unraveling, and it will unravel eventually, hopefully in our lifetime. I hope so. So yeah, one of the ways that we can understand that there is a dark force in this world is when you look around and you realize that the world that we live in is really not designed for our human nature. We're not designed to live in this way as wage slaves, being exploited for our time and our labor. We're meant to live a totally different life, and that's why we have so much mental illness in the world, people unaliving themselves, people feeling hopeless. It's because they've erected on earth conditions that we're not meant to live in. We're not meant to live day to day in this way. And you can see as well how you know that there's more power structure beyond just like a corrupted government, because you can see the agendas that they try to push down through humanity. You can see the agendas like the influence of pop culture, for example, and all the things they want us to care about through pop culture. As you've noticed, the music, a lot of rap music, a lot of things have just gotten really raunchy. Things have gotten just really just really distorted and perverse. And these are the ways that they want to influence us, as it comes down through the entertainment world. And then, influencing us in all different manner of addictions that we have. So, alcohol, drugs, stimulants, coffee, shopping, video games, gadgets and tech and all this stuff, all of the different addictions that they perpetuate, and they essentially create and make it easier for humans to go down that path, right? Because they know that happy humans don't need their addictions and don't need their vices. But they know that when humans are exploited and we're working so hard, we're so tired at the end of the day, we're supposed to live in joy and love and happiness and community. But this is not the world that we're living in. We're living separate from each other. We're always focused on survival and money, and it's getting even more so now with things getting more and more and more expensive and the cost of living going up and so on. And so they know that humans kind of need vices in order to kind of give them something, give them a bone kind of thing. And so, as Jason Christoff has shown, alcohol is one of the number one things, the number one images that we see in movies and television, making it very socially acceptable. Alcohol, numb yourself out to the pain, and that inner calling for, knowing that we're destined for a better life as humanity as a whole. And dampening our spirit and just trying to numb out all of the crazy things that are going on in the world. They know how our psyche works, and they use it against us. Like I've said before, right? Addictions, and all the agendas that they're sort of putting down through over the years, and it's getting easier to see. So as you wake up and you start to realize, okay, wow, there is this whole power structure, it can be very challenging to kind of come to terms with that. But as I've shown in other videos and things, that I believe that we are coming to the end of that. We are coming to the end of the Kali Yuga, and that we're coming up out of the Kali Yuga and an awakening. Humanity's going through a mass awakening, and I know that we're going to be shaking off this parasitic force that has been taking from humanity and has been, like I said, erecting conditions on earth that are it's unbearable. It's not the way we're meant to live. We could do so much better, and I know that so many of you in the chat could probably agree with that. So power structures. So here's another theory that I've come across that's interesting. And you're going to want to stick around because there's a couple other really cool, interesting theories. All good things to contemplate, right? So many of us have heard of, the pyramid structure idea of the power structure, right? So we've got the pyramid. So at the bottom of the pyramid, of course, and this is all just probably review for most of you who know this, right? But on the bottom of the period, which is like the biggest surface area of the period, it's the most amount of people, are the bottom, the peasants, right? The people, the wage slaves, the plebs, the individuals that on the back of our, of our hard work, all these other individuals are resting upon humanity, profiting off of our toil and labor. We literally have the whole pyramid on our backs. So the people being at the bottom. And then as you go up the pyramid, you have different levels of control. You've got, right in the chat, if you know some of the levels of control, we've got some corporations, right? These really, really powerful corporations who lobby government. We've got, big pharma. We've got like Monsanto, big ag, all these big corporations. And then above that, and go ahead and put in the chat if you know of some of the other levels of the pyramid, structure of control. So we've got the plebs, the peasants, the people, the corporations, and then you get into banks, and then you get into as well rich families and the royal family. And you've also got religion, right? The Vatican. And then who is at the very, very top is really what's shrouded in mystery. Who is at the very, very, very top of this whole structure? I think it's pretty easy to kind of go through, okay, yeah, this is sort of the pyramid of control. We know the levels, right? The people, the corporations, the banks, the rich families that have like established, Rockefeller medicine, established a lot of these things in the beginning of like, America and things like that. The Vatican, of course, you've also got the military complex in here as well. Governments, but then who's at the very, very top, right? And that's, again, like I said, what's shrouded in mystery. Now, I had heard this concept before, which I thought was fascinating. And I can't remember the name of the guy that said this, but he said, imagine like another pyramid upside down informing this one. So like maybe an off-world, almost like entity where there's also somewhat of a structure like I just went through with this pyramid. Imagine, it's a possibility. I'm not saying anything for sure here, but imagining that is also informing this reality, like it's like an off-world other reality informing this one. Who knows? It's really hard to know exactly what's beyond this reality. But yeah, like how I tend to know that it's more than just humans at the realm is that the distortion, the perversion, the way that it shows up through the programming, through brainwashing, through the programming that we've all grown up in, through the structure of society, through wars and the exploitation, through all of that, it's like, at least I do, I know that it's not of a human heart. That whoever is really truly in control of human society and where it is at right now, it's not of a human heart. I tend to believe in people's goodness. I tend to believe that that we are really gifted with the knowing of right and wrong and morality. And sometimes we need to be reminded. Like I said, humans can be corrupted, of course, especially through paycheck mind control and that sense of power. But I think naturally, without being programmed, mind controlled, and coerced, I think naturally humans don't care for control. We just want to be left in peace. We just want to live a joyful life in peace. We want to be left alone. And I think, for the most part, humans are good. So that's how I know in my heart that really, truly, who's at the helm of this whole thing it's not of a human heart. It's something else. Go ahead and put any questions, comments in the chat. If you agree with that statement, or if you have another idea, feel free, put it in the chat. Okay, so so if some of you guys might know about this book. This is one of the books of 9 books called the Ringing Cedars of Russia book series. And this is Anastasia. Some of you have maybe heard of these books. They were translated from Russian. It's meant to be like a fiction, but the author to this day says that Anastasia is real. She's a human, but she's really extraordinary, and she lives in the Siberian taiga. And this picture right behind me here is a piece of artwork from that a reader did about the series. And again, it's like 9 books. These books are hard to get a hold of, and they're really, really beautiful story. I really, really enjoyed reading them, and there's just so much richness and goodness that comes from these books. Thank you, Rose. Yeah, Rose agrees. It cannot be of a human heart that has created these conditions on Earth. So Anastasia talks about the dark forces and the controllers, and she essentially boils it down to, she calls them a priest class. Like I'm pretty sure she said there was like 3 top priests, and of the 3, there was a high priest. So essentially they would be the ones in her philosophy and her understanding of it. They would be at the top of the pyramid, the high priest. And as the story goes in the Ringing Cedars of Russia book series, the civilization called the Vedrus, which lived in Siberia area of the world, they were highly advanced but simple. They were just very sophisticated civilization, very connected with the earth, very connected with nature. And as the story goes, the Vedrus were the hardest to conquer. So this dark force conquered many, many parts of the world, but the Vedrus was the hardest to conquer because they couldn't be convinced by religion to go and worship God inside of a building and to worship a God, their God that they presented them with, because they lived in communion with the earth. They lived in co-creation with the Creator every single day, growing their food, creating life through children, and they had these really rich traditions, just steeped in ritual and love and connectedness, all this stuff. And so they couldn't be convinced to go into a building to go worship a god. They were like, no, we live in prayer every single day. And so, yeah, a really, really beautiful series. And she talks about in the book how she will, now she's a human, but she has extraordinary abilities, but how she will sit in meditation, or rather lie down in meditation, and use her ray, she calls it, to essentially like fight the dark forces and, dampen their strength on this world and on humanity. So, I think there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that's been kept from us intentionally. Like I said, I think that they could potentially live elsewhere, like on land that has not been on any of our maps. And like I said, like history, I believe, is all basically lies, deception. It's really hard to really trust anything. And that's part of the awakening process, is just really coming to this understanding, like, okay, I don't know, but I can use logical thinking, I can use deductive reasoning to better understand the world that I live in. And like I said, you can see their agendas, you can see what they're trying to do and what they're trying to put in place, and how they're trying to plant seeds of perversion in humanity, and and bring it forward. And it's like, it's very scary. Like once you really zoom out and you really see it, it's like, oof. But it makes you want to grow your light stronger, which I've absolutely found to be true. So, yeah, like I said, talking about the dark forces, bringing awareness to it, doesn't make it grow. That is a huge psyop of the spiritual community. It's basically the definition of spiritual bypassing. Is saying, oh no, we're not going to talk about the dark forces. Let's not have that conversation, because we'll only make them grow stronger. So let's just turn a blind eye. We'll turn our backs to the dark forces and we won't talk about it. We'll just focus on love and light. And it's like there is a level of truth to that, but we are at the point right now where we can no longer take that road. We can no longer just turn our backs, because they affect our lives in every single way. From the air we breathe, because of the chemtrails they spray, from the food that we eat, because of all of the modifications they do to our food. Even if you're really, trying to eat only from organic farms, it's pretty much impossible to just totally eat only natural foods. Like it's so pervasive. The seed oils, the natural flavors, It affects every little part of our life. So just turning a blind eye and just saying, no, I'm not going to look at it. It's just going to perpetuate it on for future generations. So it's important that we understand the structure. Otherwise, we can't change it. All right, so moving on to this theory from this book called Gods of Eden. And this is kind of an obscure book. I heard about it through a series of different people saying different things about who's actually controlling us. And I came across this book, and I read it in 2019, right before all the madness. And I did a little video on it, and I put it on my YouTube channel, and it's actually my most viewed video. Basically because people will Google search the name of the book, and there's not much on it, and then my video comes up. And anyways, I was just sort of doing a synopsis, and so I'll do a little bit of that for you right now. So this is pretty out there, but also not, because since reading it, it's honestly made so much sense for me. And for me, when I learn information, I tend to not just believe it right away. I'll take it in, and I'll sit with it, roll it around a little bit, take some days, and then like once I start to see evidence of it, I'll then decide, is this something that resonates or maybe it doesn't. So William Bramley was a historian. Well, he's still alive, but I'll say was, because everything changed once he started to write this book. So William Bramley, respected historian, he set out to write this book, and he wanted to write about humanity and our innate greed. This was his sort of hypothesis, right? Humanity and our innate greed and why we war with each other. And again, I will remind you that I've said that I believe that humans, on a deep natural level, without being influenced, are good. We have an internal morality that is on board, right? So, but we're easily influenced as well. We're very suggestible, and the controllers know how our psyche works. Okay, so William Bramley, he set out to write this book about humanity and war, and why we're greedy and why we war with each other. That was his hypothesis. Well, when he started to dig into everything, and he started to dig into the history and digging into kind of obscure, more deeper accounts of the past than maybe he had known before, he dug. And what he came to understand was that, wait a minute, I'm not going to write a book about humanity's innate greed and why we war with each other. What I'm finding is totally different than that hypothesis. He found that human history has been meddled with by some kind of force, that has, you know, created these conditions on earth that we experience still to this day, like unending division and fighting and toil and labor. So when he dug into the history, he started to see this whole different story, and that's what this book is about, is what he found. What he found is that humans have been meddled with by another civilization, and that they still control it today, just from behind a curtain. So let me read for you this this little, it's basically a paragraph of his summary of everything that he learned. Okay. He says, human beings appear to be a slave race languishing on earth. As such, the human race was once a source of labor for an extraterrestrial civilization, and still remains a possession today. To keep control over its possession and to maintain Earth as something of a prison, that other civilization has bred never-ending conflict between human beings, has promoted human spiritual decay, and has erected on Earth conditions of unremitting physical hardship. This situation has existed for thousands of years, and it continues today. That's his hypothesis. And like, he goes through the book and he talks all about how this civilization has meddled with us, at least over the last, I don't know, I think, where does he start this? Yeah, like 1500 BC. It would be in and around where he sort of starts. And he goes through all kinds of events of the past and accounts of the past. So this is his hypothesis. And he's opening himself up to incredible ridicule from the sort of traditional historian, like scientific community. And as you could expect, he was ostracized for writing this. But he's another example of someone who sticks to their morals, and when they find the truth of something, they express it, no matter the consequences to their life or their reputation or their livelihood, because they know, and they have that inner drive within them, and they know that morality is the supreme goal, that the truth is the supreme goal, not the possessions, not the money, that when you learn the truth, it's important to share it with others and to bring light to it. So this is a fascinating book. Essentially that we were once a source of labor. So what he talks about is that the controllers, which he calls the custodial race, he says that, this is a hypothesis, that we were created by them, and they are kind of like human-like, but they're bigger, so kind of giants. He doesn't use the word giants, but much bigger than us. And we see all kinds of evidence around the world about giants, right? So he calls them the custodial race. And initially, they didn't rule from like far away. We were like in their living quarters with them. We were building things that they didn't want to build. They created us to build, the Tower of Babel, to do all of these things, to build cities and do all the things that they didn't want to do. Kind of crafty, wouldn't you say? Creating a race that's physically smaller than you, that you can control, and like I said, they look humanoid, so they used a bit of their DNA. This is what he says, and then they were obviously more advanced race and were able to hybridize and make humans with, as the story goes, it's like mixing the DNA of them with the earth. If you've ever heard of that story of like from the Bible, it's something about clay, like mixing clay and humans' DNA together and creating what we know as humans today. Again, this is like a hypothesis. It could, there's lots of allegories and symbolism, so it can sometimes be hard to take it exactly literal. And I will just say as an aside that even if this is true, that we were, say, created by a different race, it doesn't mean that our soul is not divine. It's like our soul is from God. We are emanations of the one supreme creator. But it is possible, and that's our animating force. That's our soul. That's our spirit. That's the part of us that is from the divine. So it doesn't diminish our divinity at all to sort of talk about this hypothesis that we are, like what William Bramley said, that we are the creation of a extraterrestrial race, created to do the menial labor for them. So this was a very long time ago, obviously. So he talks about how eventually, and there's a relationship to the Bible, some Bible stories, like how the Garden of Eden, and how humans had a fall out of the Garden of Eden. But what Bramley says is that when we were in the Garden of Eden, it meant that we were ignorant to the fact that we were slaves. Essentially, we lived with them, we were their slaves, we thought of them as our gods, and we did things for them, and we loved them. But then it was during the construction of the Tower of Babel, which famously was not completed, humans started to understand that we were slaves. And this came from the knowledge of the tree of knowledge. It came from a reptile, telling one of the slaves that, hey, you're slaves. You see how they're clothed and you're not? And that is another Bible story about how we were ashamed of our nakedness, or something comes from the Bible. And it wasn't that we were ashamed, it's that we understood, through that understanding, oh my God, I'm naked, they're clothed. Oh, I'm lesser than, I'm their slave, they're exploiting me, oh my God. Putting it all together and then telling other humans, and of course humans then working together to overthrow the custodial race. And when that happened, William Bramley calls it the schism, where then the controllers, they began to control things from behind a curtain, because humans knew we were slaves. And so what they did was they took us. So this is kind of interesting to think of, because there's even old accounts of flying objects like UFOs and things. We have no idea of how long certain tech has been around, And there's lots of these old accounts of flying ships and anyway. So he says that this is interesting, because I think this could be possible, that they took, once humanity knew that we were a possession of this extraterrestrial custodial race and we didn't want to cooperate with them anymore, that they then took us all over the world, different parts of the world, taught us different languages so that we wouldn't be able to collude and understand who rules us. And then they taught them languages, whatever, helped them with, set up maybe agriculture here, this, that, whatever, and then somehow began this whole web of control, but from behind a curtain, from behind a veil. And that, like Bramley says, that we remain a possession today. And when you consider just the exploitation here, and I mean, in third world countries, the exploitation, and in first world countries too. I mean, we have, more privilege, more rights in first world countries, but we're all chained to a desk. Well, not all of us, we all have different types of jobs, but the expectations on humans to work as much as we do. I mean, they even say that peasants back in the day, they would only work a few months of the year to do the harvest and the planting, and then the rest of the year they didn't work at all. And it's when you compare peasants in the past to like what we do now, it's unbelievable like how much we actually work, and then the exploitation and the debasement of our currency, which then trickles down to the debasement of our labor itself. So 1 hour of our labor could buy you like X amount of groceries, and now today it buys you so much less. So it's, the conditions are getting worse and worse and worse, and we're coming to a precipice. We're coming to a choice point of where things are going to head from here. But at the same time, humanity is awakening every single day. I see it all the time online. I see it in my DMs and in my comment sections and in other people's comment section. You can see people are awakening to this again, right? Like we did during the construction of the Tower of Babel, if that is to be true. And so it really is, I think our freedom really truly relies on us acknowledging on a vast scale that there are controllers, and they do have their hand in our day-to-day life, and that we are not truly free. We don't have the freedoms that we could have if we were living in such a way where everyone was taken care of in a community, more of a tribe community scenario. And that brings me to another point that Bramley talks about. He says, like, to the average person, like, if the government, let's say, really truly had humanity's best interests at heart, if government really truly had humanity's best interest at heart in all decisions and whatnot, right? Because they're supposed to be public servants. That's what they're there for. That's what government in reality, in concept, is supposed to be a group of individuals handling matters for the rest of humanity, right? They're supposed to be public servants, but that's not what it's snowballed into something fucking else now. But they're meant to be public servants. But so, if we were living in a world where the government was actually had humanity's best interests at heart in all decisions, then we would be living vastly differently. We'd be living in such a vastly different way. There's a famous tribe from the book Voices of the First Day, and Paul Chek talks about this, and he says, in this tribe that was studied, they saw that if everybody from adults to elders to adolescents, if everybody did their chores for the day, that everyone would be working about 2 to 3 hours a day, tops, maybe 4. That is, taking care of food, water, shelter, any of the needs, any of the kind of ongoing needs of the tribe. Everyone was doing their part. Some days would be just like 1 hour, 2 hours. And that was it. And the rest of their time was spent being free. The rest of their time was spent observing nature. The rest of their time was spent innovating or dancing, creating art, singing, creating those rich traditions, embroidering, art, all kinds of different things, right? They would have the space to be creative and to rest, or to just not do anything and to just literally sit and stare at nature and daydream. And so if we can see that example on a smaller scale in a tribe, then that should and could be extrapolated out on the grander scale, right? On the grander scale for humanity, right? But that's obviously not what we see at all. People are working themselves to the bone and not being paid appropriately for how much life costs, and so on. And then of course, because of that, people believe their value to be like always tethered to how much money you can make. Your value and your worth is always tethered to how much money you can make, right? And that's totally an error. That's totally a lie. You know, just being alive, just existing means you have infinite worth and infinite value. So yeah, like I said, if the tribe scenario, if that can work, where everyone does their chores and everyone works like 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe 4 a day on like a long day, and then everyone is free to enjoy their life. Everyone is working for themselves, but also for each other, for the greater good. You know, and we're not seeing that on a bigger scale. We're just seeing endless corruption, endless distortion, endless perversion, and life for the average person getting, you know, more and more and more difficult. So anyways, this is, you know, kind of one of the more darker conversations than I might have. Of course, we're talking about the dark forces. But, you know, one of my biggest messages is just to have that wider awareness and to be able to understand better the world that we live in, so that you're not, when you better understand the world that you live in, you have more freedom in your mind and in your soul. Like when you think about the reasons why you feel the way that you feel, or the thoughts that you might have, like no matter how hard I work, it's never enough, or I'm never good enough, or, you know, I'm gonna work until I die and it's just the way it is and I just gotta, you know, like all of these thoughts, it's not our normal state. It's not how we're meant to live. We're not meant to be focused on survival all the time. And it's creating so much pain for so many, for all of humanity. And it's time that we shake off this parasitic force that has such a stranglehold on our world. You know, this false matrix has been foisted upon us. So that's my presentation, guys. It's one of the more like esoteric, like philosophic, difficult to sort of talk about topics. But again, like I said, if you don't acknowledge the reality of your reality, then you'll be fooled. You know? Like, for example, I tend to believe that the majority of people who are experiencing depression are simply having a natural, normal reaction to the parasitic, false matrix world that we live in. You know, and then you go to, say, get conventional help for your depression, and then you kind of enter in this whole cycle with the medical industry of getting on this medication and that medication and going to this therapist and that therapist and ruminating and keep talking about your problems and so on and so forth, when all we really need to do is look at the environment and say, hang on, wait a minute. I don't think we're meant to live this way. Maybe the way I feel is actually a natural, normal reaction, you know? So keep that in mind. When you don't understand the world you live in, you're much more easily fooled. So it's I think it really is important during these times to seek the truth, to be a truth seeker, to know and understand this reality and what's going on. And I know that many of us, we get caught up in the endless doom scroll and the addiction of our phones and our scrolling. And I'm guilty of it too, because it's sort of this really wanting to know, right? Wanting to know what's going on, especially during COVID times. I found myself really glued to my phone. But thankfully, since then, I've come back to really rich, beautiful spiritual practices that help ground me during this time. But like I said, I think it really, for those at least that feel the call towards knowledge and seeking, that it's important to continue answering that call and sort of pulling on that thread, because when you begin to understand more about the false matrix layer that's on top of this world that we all have to live within, it gives you a level of freedom in your mind, and it helps remove fear as well. And understanding who the dark forces are is part of that. So all of the things I shared today, from David Icke's spider in the middle of the web analogy, to William Bramley's Gods of Eden, the custodial race, to Anastasia's ideas around the dark forces and who they are, these are all like possibilities. And of course, too, like we talked about, the pyramid of control, which, again, many of you are probably familiar with. And then the potential of there being an off-world, other pyramid sort of influencing this one. But essentially, like, I really, truly do believe we are coming to a point where humanity is going to wake up en masse and understand that we've been lied to on such a grand scale, and that there are dark forces that are in control of this world, and we're not going to have anything to do with it anymore. And one of the best places to start, guys, is by removing your your consent and your addictions to these things that sort of lower your life force, like really taking a hard look at your addictions. We all have them. I have them. I've struggled with smoking for many years. Tobacco had its hooks in me, and it still does actually to this day, but I've come to a place of just, maturity with it, and understanding that I appreciate being sober much more, and having my awareness be clear. Same thing goes with even something as simple as ganja, right? Like, these things can be they can be helpful in certain circumstances, but when they become repetitive and very addictive, and they're part of your daily life, it becomes escapism. And so to allow them to be what they are for you, but then to let them go. And drinking the stimulants as well, the coffee, the those energy drinks, like all these things, these are the ways in which the dark forces have their hooks in you. So if you can start with that, starting with your actions, right? And also with your money, like buying local, buying from organic farmers, buying higher quality food whenever you can. These are all things that we can start to do. And like I said, I think humanity is awakening to the dark forces, and eventually, once there is acknowledgement of their existence, I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I think we'll begin to probably do some kind of mass non-compliance of some kind. To take away their control. Now, I'll leave you with an interesting question that a viewer asked me last week, and I didn't know how to answer it, but I think it's interesting. He said, what will happen to the dark forces once humanity wakes up? Where will they go? What will they do? Yes, the world is waking up. Maybe the dark forces will shrivel from all the light from all the people choosing a better way. All right, guys, thank you for being here. Please, please share the live out. Double tap the screen. I'm going to be showing up here at least until Christmas every Tuesday night. And then, of course, my content will be over on Locals, which is a free speech platform. And it's a subscriber platform, but you don't have to subscribe right away. You can just make a quick profile and then click follow, and that way we'll be in touch. Because you're going to want to follow your favorite truth speakers, because we're coming into a time where we're going to be a lot more censored, and it's going to be hard to find your favorite truth speakers. So make sure to follow them on all of their alternative platforms. Again, Locals is a free speech platform. It was created by someone who... Awesome, Marta, you joined. Amazing. And it was created by someone who was canceled by Patreon. And so he turned around and said, you know what? We need a place to have censor-free content and people to be able to share the truth. So all you got to do is click the link in my bio and you'll be prompted to set up a quick profile on Locals. And definitely check out some of the other creators on there. There's some really amazing creators on Locals. And then make sure to join and follow me. You can join for $9 a month, or you can just click subscribe and get some of my content for free. So yeah, so thank you guys. All right, we'll chat soon. I'll see you next Tuesday night. Not sure exactly what the topic is going to be, but maybe it'll be a lighter one since we just chatted about the dark forces. I have wanted to have a chat to you guys about just basically the case for yoga in your life. I'm 40 and I've been doing yoga since I was like 16. I teach all the time. See you later, Mabio. And yoga's really changed my life in such incredible ways. And it's really truly the elixir of youth and vitality. And so we'll probably dive into that next week, just the case for yoga. If I can influence you anyway to start a yoga practice, I hope I can do that. So tune in next week, guys. Thank you for being here. And I'll talk to you soon. Namaste. Bye.